Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CSA Security Update. I am your host, DiMaria, and as organizations accelerate their cloud and AI adoption, internal audit is being pushed to really a new era of complexity. Hybrid and multi-cloud environments really introduce additional challenges that range from governance gaps and misconfigurations to insecure APIs, identity sprawl, and limited visibility into certain data flows. So to really help us unpack these risks and discuss how internal audit can strengthen cloud governance and security posture, I'm joined today by Jerrad Bartczak from Advantage Partners. Jerrad's been in the compliance space for a lot of years as an external auditor and an external auditor for several organizations. He's conducted SOC 2 audits, 27001, ISO 42001, and high trust audits. And he is now an IT audit manager at Advantage Partners for AI and special projects, including building out new service lines to further support his clients and their compliance goals. So together, we're going to explore practical strategies for building scalable monitor audit programs and how frameworks like CSA's Cloud Control Matrix and others can anchor cloud assurance efforts. So cloud security over years has obviously become a business imperative. So let's just dive right in. And Jerrad, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Great intro. Thanks for having me, John. Excited to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. I have a great audience out there. I always like to start out by just telling us a little bit about Jerrad and a little bit more about your organization.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so exactly as you stated, I've been in the industry for a while now, conducting several different types of audits across the board, from SOC 2, ISO 27001, ISO 42001. I trust for a long time, so really have seen frameworks across the board there. Maintain CISSP, CISA, AAIA, the alphabet soup of certifications
Yeah.
there. So yeah, no, I've been in the IT audit space for a while, and have picked up this interest in AI compliance and AI governance and keeping up on those initiatives. So yeah, currently at Advantage Partners here, in which we are external assessors. So we conduct SOC audits, ISO audits for our clients, as well as advisory services and pen test and the like there. So yeah, exciting times, and excited to be a part of this.
Yeah. So, I guess to start with the obvious question, because, throughout the years, 27001, SOC 2, and others, security is, we've been building our standards and everything against security for many years. So I guess, some organizations may be asking the question, why does my organization need to consider yet adopting an AI-related security standards and frameworks instead of what I've already built?
Right, yeah, and for sure, and that is definitely a valid question. So yeah, like you mentioned, throughout the years, security has been developing, several standards across the board there, with organizations determining which one, in fact, best meets their goals as an organization. But as we start moving, into the direction of AI and AI technologies, it's important to have more AI specific frameworks in mind when it comes to security, because there are differences between AI systems and your normal, run-of-the-mill systems you are developing, right? So, many organizations may think they already have controls in place, right, to keep their AI systems secure, whether they're developing systems or just using AI systems. But, however many times, it might be an afterthought. And that's what we've seen, throughout the years in security audits, that oftentimes security was an afterthought. You just wanted to build a good system for your users that they could use, gave them the answers they needed, right? And that was it. And then you thought about security when something happened down the road, right? But really, we want to build this environment of thinking about security from the start and throughout the whole life cycle there, from start to finish, just to prevent, those moments in the future from happening altogether. Oftentimes it's, a little bit of a downer when, for engineers, when you start talking about security, they have all these great ideas of what they want to develop for the system, for AI systems, and then, someone like me comes in and tells them, oh, you got to meet all these security things. It's a little bit of a downer, right? but but it's ultimately, one of the most important things out there. Thinking about it, every, different organization and, things have different definitions of an AI lifecycle, right? But I just wrote down here Palo Alto's as an example, right? So they have 7 different stages of an AI life cycle, starting from problem definition to data collection, data preparation, model design, model training, model deployment, and then monitoring. So those are what they define as the stages of an AI development. And really there, a lot of times people will be like, okay, we'll just think about security in the end. But, in reality, you can be thinking of it throughout there. So starting at the first, right? Problem definition. What is the problem you want to solve with your AI system? Really there, the first security thing that comes to mind should be, impact assessments. How is your system going to impact users, society, things along those lines? And then, regulatory compliance. Where is our market? Are we in the EU, who now has, a EU AI Act that I have to meet, things along those lines. And then you can just go step by step down this. If we go down to data collection, it falls into data quality, anonymization, consent to even use the data in the first place, all those security concerns, data preparation, creating secure data pipelines. And, I could talk forever on this as we keep going down. So I'll keep it short and sweet there, all the way down to the end in monitoring, which is what we do with audits, right? Just, making sure that systems are overall in a good security outcome there, and ensuring overall that they are accountable and transparent, right? So accountable being that, there's some sort of responsibility for the outcomes of the system, and transparent, you can explain where that answer of the AI system came from and how it made its decision in the long run.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things, takeaways from that is you mentioned data quality, which is to me extremely important, and of course standards and frameworks. Well, they don't really mention that, right?
Right.
It's just and then data integrity, of course, as you were discussing about the the information you're getting and the integrity of that information, not just measuring for the sake of measuring, right? But
Right.
getting something good quality that has great integrity that you can count on. But as I see where, over the years that I've been involved with standards and so on, there's usually just a few things that make people want to take this move into AI security and other standards. One is, mandates a lot of times drive everything, right? And I used to say when I was at BSI, that we love mandates because people want to get certified.
Right. Brings in more work. Exactly.
Yeah, but so having said that, and that let's face it, in business world, I mean, it's truly something that's a huge driver because you have so much budget to go around, and
Right.
so you got to make decisions. So looking at that from a mandate perspective, what are some of the related laws that exist that could affect an organization and make them want to dig deeper and get more into the AI governance perspective of things?
Right. Yeah, for sure. And, one right off the bat is one that I already hinted at a little bit there a few minutes ago, is that the big EUAI Act, which is really the first, flagship regulation there, taking the lead on things, and went into effect last year, August of 2024. And so that's one of the big ones that is sort of driving all the following regulations as well. A lot of them are taking, some pages out of their book and defining things the same way, and things along those lines. So yeah, the EUAI Act, takes a risk-based approach there. So, low risk systems, low risk AI systems have voluntary requirements that they can meet. It would be good if they did meet these requirements. But, if you fall in the high risk category, that's something you must meet, right? Where if you're doing business, operate in the EU, you must meet these certain requirements, right? And, high risk systems are defined as, any system that would have the capability to negatively impact either human safety or human rights. So you can think, the transit sector, right? So AI systems controlling trains in a country, if something were to go wrong, that could, hurt people if something happened, right? Or, the healthcare space, if an AI system in the healthcare industry were to fail, it can make poor decisions on people's, health outcomes, things along those lines, which, would be negative all around. So you can sort of think of things like that when you're thinking high risk systems.
Yeah, and complexity comes to mind when I think about high risk systems. People have all different standards implemented, and yet another one, some other ones come along. But some of the standards that are out there and frameworks are similar but expanded to now being expanded to move AI. Let's talk about just a few of those and how maybe a little integration talk as well. I'll give you 42001 as a given. But what are some of the other standards that are really trying to integrate and handshake with AI compliance?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, ISO 42001 there, as you just mentioned, one of the big ones. You got NIST, who is developing standards, right? The NIST AI risk management framework that's out there. And as well as CSA, right? Yourselves, who are developing the AI control matrix, which I actually had the honor to author part of that, the auditing guidelines for the AICM. So that was a great experience there, being able to take the controls that have been developed for the AICM and then take it a step further and actually write a list of how auditors could follow and actually show that those controls are in place within an organization. So that was my role there, and in that aspect, which was a great experience to be able to be a part of that. But yeah, so as you mentioned, 42001, right, as well, being an international standard, establishment, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving AI management systems, which includes anything from policies. Does your organization have an AI policy, policies on AI risk assessments, risk treatment processes? Who's are your shareholder or stakeholders conducting meetings to discuss results of, AI risks? So, if an AI incident occurred, do you have reports that are documenting impact assessments, risk assessments, all those fun things, just making sure you have that paper trail going,
Yeah.
right, of all the things within your organization. But yeah, leading into the AICM as well, because one of the best things there is that the AICM sort of connects a bunch of the different standards together, right? So it was mapped to include, so many other standards, IC4, 600-1, ISO 42001, the EU AI Act itself, right? So all these, different standards and regulations that the authors writing the controls for the AICM had in mind as they were, defining all of these controls, a total of 243 controls across 18 domains, including audit and assurance, business continuity, change controls, a lot of those topics that you see across different frameworks, which is really where that, unity between frameworks sort of developed from there.
Yeah, and as you said, the ICM maps to a lot of different standards, and we even showed the deltas between from the standards, and if it's fully compliant or partially compliant. But because it does that across many other standards, I guess it begs a question. I mean, because a lot of organizations, I know organizations that are certified to 10, 15 different standards across their organization. So weaving that into your culture now could be sort of a daunting task. How would an organization how do they juggle this additional, it's like you don't want to just revolving door of audits, right? It
Right.
makes more sense to put it, to weave it together as one management system. So maybe you could discuss how organizations can juggle this along with all the other audits that they have going on.
Sure, for sure. And, that is, throughout my experience, one of the most common concerns that clients have, right, is I'm already completing, insert this assessment here, right? SOC 2, ISO, all these other, frameworks. I'm doing all these audits. I already have these controls built around those. How can I keep expanding to more and more and more? And, they're often concerned about the big ones being effort, time, complexity, all those things that it requires to expand. But in reality, it's ultimately the cost of having a secure, mature security framework. So sure, any one framework existing is better than having none within your organization. But once you start integrating a few together, implementing a lot of these ones that have mapped back to several different frameworks, that's where maturity really starts to build there. And contrary to many beliefs, it is relatively easy to implement some in tandem to others, right? So one that comes to mind just based on my experiences in the past, right, is the big ISO 27001 to ISO 42001, right? So in my experience, I've conducted 42001 assessments for organizations where it was their first ISO assessment, ever. They haven't dove into ISO before. And then on the other hand, I assessed some where they were already 27001 certified, and then they were moving into 42001. And in most cases there, the organizations that already had that 27001 baseline fared a lot better because they understood the concepts of management systems, common ISO requirements, because there's some requirements that just span across both, where there's just maybe a little tweaking going on for AI specific controls, right? So it's more of tuning existing controls rather than starting all over from scratch, which is exactly where the AICM thrives as well there, being mapped to all those standards, promoting harmony, which is the biggest thing in AI compliance is harmony rather than breaking up different frameworks there.
Yeah, and that's the neat thing about the star level 2, and we'll continue on with the star for AI level 2, is the maturity model assessment that goes along with that. Not all management systems are created equal. Not all controls or domains are the same. So the maturity model assessment, to your point about mature organizations, is really to help organizations, give themselves credit for what they're doing well and concentrate on maybe some of the weaknesses to sort of maximize that budget and not spend a lot of time on things that don't need to be fixed.
Right, exactly.
So that's I think a certain dimension of star level 2 that you don't see in a lot of other frameworks. But we talked about this implementation, weaving it into current standards, so on and so forth. You touched a little bit upon, you know, auditing organizations, 27,001 and 42,001. So maybe explain for those who've not gone out to, have not gone through this before, what does an audit against these frameworks? What is that and all these standards? What's that kind of look like from your perspective as an auditor? What's your approach, and how do you have that relationship?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And I'll try to keep this a little bit more generic and rather than going into any specific frameworks, because ultimately in the long run they do all have the same sort of flow throughout the different stages as well. So biggest one, number one, right, is scoping, determining what exactly is in scope. What is the main system you are auditing? Supporting systems to that system. What databases? What servers? Are you in the cloud? Are you hybrid, partially in the cloud, one in, an on-site location? Or are you completely, on-prem, not in the cloud at all, right? Determining what office locations would be in scope, determining what teams are involved. That's really step one, is scoping and getting that down, because that's really going to drive the whole rest of the process, right? And if the auditor and the client, has a good idea from the start what the exact scope is, that just ensures a smooth audit where, we're not halfway through the audit and, we find out something else is in scope and sort of have to backtrack and retest things and things along those lines. So really that's, step one there is determining scope. And then from there really is preparation, right? And this can either be done solely on the client side or alongside your auditor if they offer readiness assessments, advisory work, things along those lines. But ultimately ensuring that you have the proper policies, you have the proper procedures, processes, technical controls, right? Settings are in place that need to be in place. All that, sort of prior to the kickoff of the audit itself. And then from there, your auditor will request evidence. So that would be in the form of a request list, detailing the exact things we want to see throughout the process, specific policies we want to see. technical screenshots we'll want to see of certain systems, right? And so that'll be a list of basically this is everything you need to provide us in order to get through the assessment. And then from there, fieldwork comes into play, which is the fun part there, right? So that's going to be the face-to-face auditor to client, right? We're on calls talking together. The SMEs are coming in and talking to us about all the fun systems they're working on. The engineers are coming in, HR is coming in, all these different departments are coming to talk and explain what they do and how they're meeting certain controls and explaining any evidence that might not be clear to an auditor. And that's really where the back and forth is in an audit process. And then from there it goes into testing. So auditors review all the evidence, determine where the gaps are, communicate that back to the client, and then we get into final stages. So really, a closing meeting, the official wrap up, final gaps are discussed. Final certification decision is communicated, right? So did you pass the certification? Was there too many gaps where you couldn't pass? That conversation is had. And then just, the next steps of reporting, in that final report in your hands, and any follow-ups, preparing for next year, closing out any gaps that were identified, and overall, going back to that theme of having a mature security framework and the controls in place, wrapping up any of those gaps so next year they aren't an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Great process. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's showing and just reminding everyone about the fact that not looking at just the standards requirements, but your internal requirements as well. I've done my own audits in the past where bring an issue up and people say, "Well, the standard doesn't say that." I go, "You're right. The standard doesn't say that. You said that."
Yep, your policy says that exactly. You wrote those rules. Yep.
Yeah. So be careful. Paint yourself in a corner if you're gonna, build this super secure management system. Make sure you can manage it properly, and that it's not overtaxing your resources. Be reasonable in terms of your, level of risk are you really at, and what level of mitigation do you really need? I mean, just a whole lot of difference depending on what kind of business you're in. So, and those, as you said, the scope drives a lot of that. So the expectations as an auditor are probably going to be a little bit different from company to company. But so, so this has been a great discussion. I'd just like to move into what I call my crystal ball round here. Typically, this is just give you a chance to give your own personal views on AI, where this thing is going. And I'd also like to hear, because I talked to some CBs and they kind of avoid the question when I asked them about, is AI going to start taking over audits or play a bigger role in the audits? Maybe you'll always need a human there, of course, but
Right.
is AI going to be, you see AI starting to play a bigger role in the audits, and just where you think this whole thing's going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, for sure. And I love this question. So, this is awesome. And yeah, for sure. It's starting off with the tough one there. Is my job safe, right? As an auditor, is AI going to start auditing things? In the future, I think it's only going to grow, right? We're going to start implementing AI into our audit processes, right? Where we're using it to do some of the more tedious tasks, right? Does this policy state this thing? What is the date that was signed off on this specific document? Things along those lines. I think AI is going to play a huge part in the near future, right? And just implementing it to make our jobs easier, as well as our clients' jobs easier. They can get reports faster, right? Things along those lines. But in the long run, I don't think it's fully going to take over. Exactly as you mentioned, there's going to have to be a human somewhere just to make sure everything is going as it should be. The good old, you can't have computers auditing computers scenario there. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. It's only going to make things easier, quicker, more efficient. But in the long run, you're still going to have that human interaction where it's going to be a real life auditor that's going to have the final say, reviewing everything in the end and issuing that certification there.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever get rid of the human beings in
Right.
that regard. There's a lot of interaction there that is so very important to organizations, for monitoring, especially monitoring and continuous education and continual improvement. I mean, that's all things that you kind of analyze as an auditor that maybe AI doesn't have insight to, because it's
Right.
so it's always
Yeah, and
going to
then
be there.
yeah, the other big one as well is right experience. Right, if AI is seeing something for the first time, you can't really teach it those real life experiences that auditors have had of the past. I've seen this, things along those lines. So that's another big one as well. Is that emotion experience type aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, this has been a great discussion. It's a big subject. We've talked about it in the past with others, and it continues. Auditing, internal auditing is becoming a big subject now that I think the dust, even though AI is still growing by leaps and bounds, the dust is starting to settle a little bit in terms of how we want to position ourselves for compliance and audit. So yeah, great discussion. I'm sure as fast things are moving, there'll be an opportunity for a sequel here somewhere down the road. But I really appreciate it, especially now coming up to the holidays. Everybody's really extremely busy trying to close out the year. So we appreciate you coming on and taking out some of your time to spend with us.
Yeah, for sure. And likewise, this has been great. And yeah, I'm definitely open to the talks in the future. This is awesome. Great subjects.
Yeah, fantastic. So anyway, Jerrad, thank you very much. And yeah, we'll do it again. And thanks, everyone. And we'll talk to you real soon.